Peace and Black Power family, Harlem educator, author, and activist, the Black Liberation coach, Brother IJ Taimba. You know, I'm filming live on location at wonderful historical and political village of Harlem, New York. Family, yesterday I had the privilege of being invited to speak on a panel virtually to discuss this whole concept of critical race theory. To give some background, I was on a panel with two other guests. It was hosted by brother Reverend Townsend, Lamar Townsend. I want to give him a shout out, his brother Marlon as well, and also the guest panelists that I was on the panel with. I'm doing this. I wanted to do my own show broadcast to discuss it because when you're there in a panel with other people, sometimes some of the critical points you want to make get lost, right? And I want to make sure, and the reason that we have a channel is that we can air our views and opinions as we see fit, right? Okay, so that's what I wanted to discuss today because there's so much talk around this thing called critical race theory. So today, what is critical race theory? Why is it being attacked? What are the key things you need to know? I'm not going to teach you no college class right now, fam. We don't have time. I'm going to get into the basics. First thing you need to know is its background. Critical race theory, which we're gonna abbreviate as CRT, is basically an analysis of racism in the United States and the Western world, so to speak, right? And this basically emerges in the mid '70s. Why that time? Because this is a time when the civil rights attorneys, the law school students, the legal scholars are looking at the civil rights movement and they're trying to figure out, they're being evaluative. They're critiquing themselves. They say, wait a minute, all the protest movements, right? All the marches, all the sit ins, all the legislation passed, presumably that was civil rights legislation to help black people. And racism is still here. Years after the Brown versus Board decision, Supreme Court decision is passed, supposedly desegregating American public schools, the American public schools are more segregated than they were before Brown versus Board. So they're trying to grapple with how did we get all of this legislation, and yet we're still looking at racism right up in our face. Racism has not been eliminated. How is this possible? So CRT emerges as a way of trying to answer that question. And um, it's very important that people understand that first and foremost. Lawyers of the civil rights movement were trying really to understand why racism remained, despite all of the attempts, all of this so-called civil rights legislation. That's where it comes from. You hear all of these YouTube people talking about it. You hear it on CNN and MSNBC, and rarely do you get a straight up answer. What is critical race theory? Right? So now you know that's basically what it is. Okay. Now, there's some important pioneers. Obviously, most of them early on were attorneys or legal scholars. So people like Derek Bell, the great Derek Bell, late great Derek Bell, Sister Kimberly Crenshaw, Richard Delgado. I think you had Linda Green, um, Patricia Collins, a feminist. So you had quite a few people who are seen as early pioneers or advocates of critical race theory, right? And as a theory, obviously it advanced a few key principles, and I should say one good thing to read would be Derek Bell's groundbreaking paper he wrote, Serving Two Masters. He really outlines the whole foundation of what we call critical race theory, and he kind of deals with very specific principles, and there are probably a few more, but these are the major principles. Number one, advocates of critical race theory and teachers of it tell us and remind us that race is a social construct, meaning it is man made, white man made. It is not biological. There's nothing about race that's biological. Yes, there are cultural differences, but there are we don't believe in biological determinism, right? That race is social. That's the first most important thing. The second thing is that racism is not accidental. Racism is not incidental. Racism is not coincidental. Racism is intentional. and that it is embedded deeply in American institutions, their values, their traditions, and obviously their laws. Remember, they're trying to explain the failure of the civil rights movement to produce the changes it set out to produce. Number three, critical race theory suggests that racism is systematic and systemic. It is not simply the old redneck with the Confederate flag on his hat and the old truck, the pickup truck that's going out lynching black people. It's not just individuals. It's not just racist slurs. It's not just the nigger word. It's not just this white person is accusing a brother of doing something he didn't do so the police can kill him. It's systemic. Whether those individuals say those things or do those things or not, it's in the law. It's in banking policy. It's in real estate policy. It's part and parcel of the American structure, right? Very important. Number four, which I think builds off of the previous points, racism. Derek Bell really advanced this, and I think he was deeply saddened by this. He understood that racism is almost should be looked at as a permanent feature of American society. And he said if we look at it that way, then our strategies will become more radical and will become more sufficient. The conclusion of CRT theorists naturally is that the civil rights movement failed, right? It didn't fail because we didn't have some strong soldiers and strong thinkers and strong activists. It failed because Derek Bell and the CRT theorists are saying they don't think that the leaders of these movements, the organizations, really understood how racism worked. They didn't, and also there was also a critique of what we would call white liberal policy, a critique of white liberal policies. What do we mean? Means that they understood that this idea, white liberals come in, they're going to save everything, right? So this idea that, part of the problem is this overly focus on race. So to get rid of racism, we're going to be a colorblind society. Yeah, right. Stop playing. That doesn't exist. That's a utopian, idealistic ideal. So they said we can't just have colorblind legislation because look what happened to affirmative action. We had affirmative action, but who does it benefit? Mostly white women. It's a result of that liberal theory. It has to look at color because it's addressing issues of color. So you can't address an issue of color by acting like color doesn't exist, right? Whether it's social or biological, it exists. Its impact is real on people, right? So they were critiquing this liberal way of looking at it. Or our big deal as black people in the civil rights movement is to have racial equality, right? They said that's a myth. We're not after racial equality. We want things that are fundamentally going to improve the lot of black people. And the way they argued that the civil rights movement and some of its legislation was framed, it was not calculated to help black people in the ways black people need it. Right? Now, we know what it is. We know around when it started. We know some of the key pioneers and some of its key principles. Now, here's the thing. Critical race theory comes out in the 70s, but there's so much argumentation and debate about it in 2023. Why? Why is all of a sudden this becomes a really big issue, right? And first, let me demonstrate that it's being attacked. We have several examples. I'll give a few. The Texas governor, Greg Abbott, has recently signed into law, a bill into law that bans discussion of current events. If the teacher is teaching a controversial current event topic, they can be banned from doing so due to this law in Texas. Also, the law stipulates that no race can be identified as let's say, a dominating race, right? And that no race can be shamed or blamed for racist acts and policies. Isn't that something? How do you discuss something intelligently if you can't say white people created racism for this reason, right? And then it's also important to know in Florida, they have banned CRT altogether. Now, I should tell you, all of these people talking about, can't teach in the public schools. The truth of the matter, family, is that rarely does critical race theory get taught in grade school. Critical race theory is usually going to encounter that more in grad school, specifically in law school courses. But certainly, as an Africana graduate student, we dealt with critical race theory all the time. But most grade school kids aren't going to be taught critical race. That's a more advanced level concept, right? Another example of the attack on critical race theory. More than 25 states in this country have introduced legislation that can restrict or ban what students can learn and what teachers can teach about United States history um, and politics, right? More than 25 states, almost half of the union, so called, almost half of the country have introduced legislation. And I should tell you, the states that have introduced the legislation is every single one of the formerly Confederate states. Naturally, they still fighting the Civil War in their mind, right? Every one of the formerly Confederate states, and surprisingly, some states in New England too. They're supposed to be real liberal and progressive. There's some states in the New Hampshire, Rhode Island, different Massachusetts, Connecticut family that have introduced some of this legislation. So it's not just the cracker states, right? So that's important to know. We also should know that in addition to this attack on CRT, this legislation that what teachers can teach, what they can't teach, there's been a huge book banning movement, family. Close to 3,000 books have been banned in public schools and public libraries throughout this country, and they've been banned for presumably including CRT issues, and some of them are gender issues as well. Now, I should tell you, if you're not aware, one of the key features of a fascist society is that books are banned and eventually books are burned, books are destroyed. The government is trying to now tell the citizenry what it can and cannot read, what it can and cannot expose its children to. That's a very alarming development that people are banning books. And when we talking about books, fam, we talking about stuff that you would not believe. Stuff like I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, Beloved. Stuff that's not even necessarily quote unquote revolutionary or even talking about critical race theory at all. Right? So let me pause. You have a comment. Sounds of San Antonio says there's a great book by Steven Steinberg. It looks at how affirmative action was allowed to be taken down. Turning Back, The Retreat from Racial Justice in American Thought and Policy. Thank you for that, Sounds of St. Elsewhere. Thank you for that. We'll leave that up for a minute so that those of you who are interested can maybe copy that down and get that book. Thank you very much for that. Now, you might be wondering at this point, so why are people attacking it? Why are they banning books? And why are politicians getting involved and saying this CRT is the worst? There's even churches, family, that are saying, oh, this CRT is terrible. We got to get rid of it. It's a threat to Christianity or whatever we believe. Let me be very clear on why people are attacking CRT. And let me say this also. There are people attacking critical race theory that couldn't even sit down and define it for you. They couldn't tell you what it even means, where it comes from, because mainstream white folk have been led to believe critical race theory is somehow we hate all white people, want to destroy white people. This is all white people are to blame. They've made it a blanket sort of indictment against white America, right? So anytime that black people are involved in liberation movements that advance certain issues, there's a white and anytime it's perceived that black people have made so-called progress, there is a white backlash. There's a white response, a reaction. It's almost an animalistic, a gut level, instinctual response. When Obama got elected, gun sales shot up all throughout America. White people were buying them guns, family. Right? So this is a form of white backlash. Actually, the CRT laws, most of them are misguided because they're developed by people who couldn't even tell you what CRT or critical race theory is. So why are they attacking it? Why are they in such an uproar? I'll tell you why. This is why. Attacking critical race theory is nothing but a tactic to mobilize the white nationalists, the white racists, to silence critiques of white supremacy and to sabotage black resistance movements. And then also, by mixing up the issues, creating all this confusion about what it is and what it isn't, it's also designed to derail the discussion, the legitimate political discussion around racist policies and practices. Because if we're all arguing over something that doesn't even, we're arguing about CRT in public schools, and CRT isn't even taught in grade school. That's derailing the discussion. That's diverting attention away from the real issues. Something that people do, oppressors do, when you're confronting them, they like to derail the issue. You say, man, we need more money. We don't have a livable wage. The racist says, well, you Negroes don't get up early enough. That's why. Should we get up early? Absolutely. But family, you can get up at 2 in the morning. If you live in a colony and you're a colonized subject, your income is not going to be a livable wage. That's just what it is. That's systemic. That goes beyond the individual and what they do or don't do. So it's really, this is all an attack on black people. And of course, some would say people of color as well. It's an attack on our right to have a radical voice, black resistance. It's an attempt to obscure the issues, confuse the issues so people don't know what's going on. And let's not forget, it's an attempt to solidify and to organize and to galvanize all those millions of disgruntled and bitter racist whites who feel like, oh my God, we're losing our country, and the Negroes and everybody else is getting the country. It's an attempt to mobilize them. It's an attempt to get some politicians elected on a bogus issue because they're able to get people's emotions involved. Let's see. Bob Cosmic, peace, brother Bob. He says the educational system in in America was created solely for all students to be obedient workers for the corporation. That's called Damn America, which we all know as Hellman's business venture. He says, not all Hellman's white folk are racist, but every Hellman benefits from the social construct called racism. Absolutely. Absolute fact. So there you have it, family. I think we have been able to summarize what critical race theory is, who created it, why it was created, some of its key principles, and why certain white conservatives are attacking it. Why are they intimidated and threatened by it? So I hope that we've answered most of your questions. We thank you for joining us. And I do want to say before we end, we thank you. Harlem Liberation School thanks you for getting us over the 1,000 subscriber mark. Okay? 1,000 subscriber mark. And now we're aiming for 5,000. If ultimately, family, we're trying to reach as many Africans, New Africans, black folk as possible, because the foundation of revolution, of change, is education. It's political education that informs people, unifies people, and motivates them to be change agents for themselves and their people. So we thank you for getting us to the 1,000 subscriber mark. If you're not subscribed to our channel, please do so now. Please spread the word. Have a beautiful rest of your day and weekend, family. Peace and black power. We will win. Peace.